let's pretend the circumstances that caused this to take so long weren't a thing. Thank you, Windows 10. I appreciate it. Right. Okay. Here we go. We've got a bitrate. We have... Alright, okay. That was equal parts me being an idiot and equal parts Windows 10 being finicky. So I went to copy the stream key back in, and Windows 10 didn't actually copy it. I right-clicked, clicked copy, said copy to clipboard, put it in. It's the previous thing I copied. So I was streaming to something that doesn't exist. Hooray! Okay. Panic over. Panic over. Whew. Right. Okay. Where was I? Right. I was going to say, this is going to be very front-loaded with economic theory, so if you need a coffee or you're likely to fall asleep, then don't. Because I know where you live. Anyway. Unfortunately, this kind of evolved into something else entirely. We're actually going to be starting with funding, because funding links into PR, and then PR links back to funding. And it's the same thing that happened last week, where it just kind of goes in a loop. But we're going to start with funding, because that's where most of the economic theory comes in. If that's okay with you, gentlemen and gentle ladies, if there's any ladies watching, there may well be. I'm not judging. So, today, good PR and funding. Well, funding and good PR, should we say. So, step one. There we go. It's going to have to take a moment to connect to the Twitch chat every time I change scene. Budget. Budget, funding, money, money flow, cash flow, costs, prices, worth, value. Ooh, such a wonderful, rich environment of figures and graphs. So, following on from last week, where I spent about an hour and a half saying what you make is determined by how you're going to make it and who you're making it for, which is in turn determined by what you're making, that entire cycle impacts your budget. So, for anything, you will budget accordingly. There's a Harry. Hello, Harry. Anything you do is budgeted. Anything you want to buy, want to make, will have a cost if you're making, a price if you're buying. So, the first thing are the two main kinds of costs. There are fixed costs, which are also called indirect costs, and there are variable costs. Now, I can't remember if I had this. Listen, no, I didn't. So, funding is what makes anything. You can't make anything without money to do it. Money makes the world go round. And there are two kinds of funding for game development. But on a universal, every market, every industry level, you need to know what it is, who it's for, and all that good stuff from last week. And that will always inflate your budget. So when funding or applying for funding, know how much it will cost and plan for the event that something goes wrong. So, there are two things you need to know about this. First is finance. So you need to know how much all these contracts, the hardware, submission fees, legal fees, salaries, wages, coffee breaks will cost. And a lot can be negotiated, so don't stress about thousands for a single person. Because, you know, if you're hiring someone, they might not want to be paid £5,000 for an hour of work, you know? Or they might. I don't know why they wouldn't. I'll get back to you on that. Now, the one thing to know about this is when you're financing everything and you're working out roughly how much it's going to cost, don't be conservative. Don't say, oh, I won't need that much, or, that seems like too much. Don't worry about asking for too much. If anything, bloat a bit. Is that who I think it is? No, it's not. It's Amazon. Okay. Plan for every individual thing you're budgeting for to cost more than it will. This will help you immensely, because many people know games have run out of money. Need to remember a game that wound up owned by the state of Rhode Island, whose name escapes me right now. They had to apply for funding, and it became owned by the state of Rhode Island for some reason. So you need to know how much everything is going to cost. And if you don't know how much it's going to cost, educated guess. And if you can educated guess, you can increase the price a little. So you can not run out of money. So how do you do this? You plan. You plan everything. So you calculate how much you want in total for your game. Take a percentage of that total. A suitable percentage. And then Harry, and then you have to go, how much am I willing to plan ahead? So if you're going to ask for, let's do the example, £250,000 to make a game, or any product, we'll say a game for this instance, you take 20% of that, so £50,000, and you add it on top. That 50,000 that you just added, that percentage of your total, is there in case anything goes wrong. So you would have that 50,000 that isn't needed, but you'd have just in case something goes wrong. And something will go wrong. If you ever think it won't, it will. The general, when I was at uni, what they said, I say when I was at uni, I stopped tomorrow. When I was at uni, they said about 40%. Hi Max. So if your text breaks, if your place is flooded, if you need any more licenses, help, PR teams, wink wink, legal, anything at all, if you don't have this, if you don't have that percentage and you need it, you're up the creek. There is nothing you can do. So to work out how much you need to ask for, and therefore that percentage to cover anything going wrong, there are two kinds of costs. There's a fixed cost and there's a variable cost. So now we're finally going to touch these. Fixed costs are things that remain constant. They are fixed. And they are indirect to the actual production of what you're making. So in terms of games development, office rent, that's a number that's not going to change, but it has nothing to do with you actually making the product. The fees for one-time buys of hardware. The monthly salaries, specifically monthly salaries. Those contracts where you pay people a set amount of money over a set period. That's a fixed cost. They are indirectly related to production of your good, your game. And they will be the same no matter how much of that game you produce. This really only applies for like manufacturing and stuff, but if you produce 10,000 units or something, the fixed costs wouldn't change. Excuse me. Variable costs, though, the one that's off to the side there, because that's actually the more important one. So when I said monthly salaries, that's because wages, such as hourly pay, is dependent on how many hours someone works. If someone only works 30 hours a week, but works 35 the next week, that's not a fixed cost. So the two kinds of salaries are two separate kinds of costs. Every individual resource, such as materials, technology, so on and so forth. So again, this relates more to, well, I suppose in game development. There is, but in the name of, in the interest of game development, there's two. Because the two are fixed costs and variable costs. Variable costs could count as like freelance workers, that kind of thing. Because it's not defined in contract how long they need to be there. So for example, a voice actor, for instance, you're not going to in advance hire them for 6 weeks, you know. You're going to hire them for however long it takes for them to record the thing. So really, variable costs mostly come into production when you're making physical copies of games. So bulk buying cartridges or discs, basically. So you take, so however many you want to make will vary, because you might want to make 100,000, 10,000, 50,000, and you'll have to accommodate appropriately. That cost is variable because that is directly influencing the production of your good, because if it's a game coming to be released physically, it needs something to release on. So you need to remember bulk buying as well. If you bulk buy in, you can buy more for less, generally speaking. There are going to be rare instances where there are some industries where it's just buying more at once and it doesn't actually cost you anything less per unit, which is, but that doesn't matter. So, how much you buy influences this. So this is when I said we're going deep into the economics. Economies of scale. The concept that as you buy more of any particular resource, therefore enabling you to produce more of whatever you're making, the average cost of that resource per unit will decrease, reducing the long-term average cost of your output per unit. So, the little smiley face sign is the long-run average cost over the total production run of whatever you're making. Then you have down the side, you have the average cost of each of whatever it is, whatever material you're buying, which is marked by the letter C and the dotted line. And your output along the bottom is how many of the thing you're making you've made, which is marked by Q for quantity. So, at C, you can only produce Q. However, if you were to buy, in bulk, lots more of your material, it would reduce the overall cost, on average, to C1. And at that cost, you could actually produce more for less. So, producing more for less means that your long-run average cost per unit of the thing you're making is at C1 Q2, right at the bottom of the curve. Does that make sense? Because this is an incredibly bizarre concept to explain to someone who doesn't do economics. I'm just concerned that we're going to go a bit too deep into the rabbit hole today. And I need a drink. My voice is... whew. So basically, as you buy more of a particular material, the average cost per unit of buying it goes down. In turn, and you have more. The scale is just focused in the long run. You can have short run as well. But long run is relevant for making video games because of labor. We'll get into that. That's the next thing. So, you'll see what I mean. So, if you are a larger company, you have more money to spend. You have more money to spend, you can spend more money on more of your resources. You do that, reduces the cost. But if you do it too much, you end up going into diseconomies of scale, which is the other side of the graph, where it starts going back up. This is where, once you hit that sweet spot, where your long run average cost is lowest, each unit of output you produce will cost more than the last one. So, this breaks us into the biggest problem in making a game, actually, with regards to your budget, is economies of scale and law of diminishing returns. This law applies to production of anything, ever. Bread, cars, games, software, absolutely anything. So assuming ceteris paribus, which is, that basically means all other aspects remain constant, if you were to increase the capacity of one part of your production, so in the case of making a game, if you were to hire more 3D animators, there will come a point where the more people you hire, the less you're going to make. So, in the concept of games, take the 3D animator example. If you were to hire 10 3D animators, but you only really needed 5 of them will be sat there not doing anything. And you will have wasted money. You'll have spent money on something that is reducing your efficiency. The best example is to do with car production, which is where if you have too many people on the assembly line, there'll be people standing around not doing anything, waiting. Because while I have more people doing the job, there's less things to do the job with. So with the 3D animators, if you just hired them, where are your PCs? Where is the work to be done? You don't need 10 people to do 5 models, you know. So as the inputs you're putting into your production the people you're hiring, the software you're using. As you're using that less and less effectively, you are wasting money. And so the average cost of everything you're making will increase, and you've just piddled away some money, and it's gone off down the stream. So while this isn't immediately apparently relevant to game design, it is, because look at all the Kickstarters that run out of money. Look at all the games with budgets into the sky. 500 million. Some, God forbid, the day they hit 1 billion on a consistent basis. Think about you as the little guy. As the little guy, you're not going to have that much money. You can't afford to hire all these people because your diminishing returns will be hit significantly quicker. If the phrase "too many cooks in the kitchen" is probably the most common way of visualizing this. Too many people spoil the broth. And with making a game, too many creative minds on one task can spoil said task. Too many people not doing anything can spoil the task. You have to... This is all about allocation of resources, which was touched on last week, where everybody has scarce resources. And those resources are, no matter how plentiful, limited. Your resources, in this case, is money. Don't spend all your money on people who won't do... who you don't need. Make sure you've planned your funding to be the most cost-effective possible. Hire only the right people, get only the right technology, and if you do that, this hopefully, this is why we have the extra percentage on top. So in the event that this does happen, you have, you won't know it's happening either. That's the big thing. You won't know it's happening because your product takes a long time to make, hence the long run average costs. That means you won't know you're wasting money until it's too late. Which, when you look at games that have come out and failed to meet sales expectations, they said, oh, to make a profit it needs to sell 2 million units, but it sells 1.5 million units. It's because it was made inefficiently. And they spent too much money to the point where it diminished their returns. If your cost exceeds the revenue you're getting back, you're not making money. You're losing money. And that's the entire principle behind diminishing returns. The money you put in, you have to make back. So if you don't watch out for inefficiency, like diminishing returns, or if you don't bulk buy appropriately, you will, even though you won't see it, be wasting money. Does that make sense? Basically, this was an entire roundabout way of saying these are the reasons that you don't know about, that you don't want to spend thousands and thousands on one person. It's all about efficiency. Nothing is going to be perfectly efficient as well. You just have to get as close to that sweet spot as possible. And with regards to glorious amounts of funding, overcompensate. I said it earlier, and I'll say it now. Ask for more money than you need. So, this graph, which I found on Google, pretty much tells you what you need to know. On the y-axis, we have the percentage of project time, which is how long the project is to completion, from 0 to 100%, and then you've got the amount of your budgeted expenditure. How much money did you budget for? So let's say 100% is £100,000. If you look at 80% of the money gone, it's at 80% completion. However, they planned for it to be around 70% of the budget gone for 80% completion. The actual expenditure was initially much higher than they were intending. Something could have gone wrong. They could have not planned for something. So, if you have that little 20 to 40% off to the side, when this happens, and it will, when you get to that, oh, I should have 50% of the project done for 50% of the budget, and you find it's actually 40% of the project done for 60% of the budget, you have the stuff off to the side in case you need it. Does that make sense? It's very... It's not something to explain without spewing all kinds of technobabble. But the graph shows what happens. And if you didn't have stuff attached to your budget, that little pocket off to the side, you're again, you're up the creek. That's going to be a phrase. That's the phrase coming out of this one. Up the creek. Okay. So, now you know the reasons why your project can end up spending more money than it can, the economic reasons behind it, tied to the game reasons behind it, and an actual representation of why you overcompensate. So within gaming, there are going to be two key ways to get funding that I'm going to discuss. You just need someone to give you money now, unless you're rich. So the first option is publishers. And for small people, that's not the most popular choice, I have to admit, as publishers often retain creative control. Typically, when you go to a publisher, it comes in installments. So at certain deadlines, you'll get more money out of an agreed amount. But you have to constrain to very frequent time limits and very frequent... Some games suffer from executive meddling, which is just a way of the publisher. They see them as paying for it, so they will believe they have some sort of creative control, which in some respects is true. And with regards to something like contracted work, say if you're making a licensed game, this is the only way you're going to do it, and unfortunately you will have to constrain to whatever budget they give you. Now, there are programs, like the big one I'm thinking of is EA Partners, or whatever the heck it's called now. In addition to these installments though, and the deadlines, which can be every week, every 2 weeks, you have to pitch your game. And for a small guy who's just making a game in their bedroom, that is a terrifying experience. Your idea has to be safe, because publishers, especially the bigger ones, they're spending millions on games that they know will make that money back, usually, unless it's terrible. And your super creative idea that's never been done before may not be a safe investment. For big companies, they are run by people in suits, for people in suits. Investors want the profit, and if your project isn't likely to boost those profit margins, don't be too excited, because the answer will probably be no, unless you can give them a margin, because a lot of games just break even, and the smaller things off to the side are what bring in the money, which is why microtransactions and DLC are a thing now, actually, because the base game itself doesn't make any money. So these smaller projects that these big companies are taking up from indies is a way to make back some money, but if it's not going to make back that money, the EA phrase of take you out back is what happens. Because you know at E3, EA always brings out a terrified indie onto stage who's never been there before and probably never will be again out of fear. And you know they've got their game in the back, in a cage. So you can hear it in their voice, like, if I don't sell this and it doesn't do well, I'm done. But that's publishers. You know, it's a big risk, and you have to try and pitch it as something profitable. The other option is, oh goody, crowdfunding. So this is a very good way to get your game in the public mind from the start. And it will be funded by the people who want it. The people who will play the game, usually. And if you have a niche game, this is probably the best way to go about it. And if you are a recently out-of-work developer who is looking to get into the game-making scene again but can't find a publisher, this is also a very safe way to do it. Now, you still need to pitch your game, but in not as much of a business-like manner, because I said it in the AMA last week. The people looking at your Kickstarter don't care about your business structure. They don't care about how much money it's going to make them. They care about the game. So, you have to be as open as possible about the cost of your game within legal, NDA'd, ethical reasons, obviously. You can't say, oh yeah, I'm only paying this guy £15 a week. You know, that's a problem. But if you're not careful with that, the PR nightmare begins. You know, how many Kickstarters and Indiegogos have come under fire from the PR angle because of where's that money going? Because even though, yes, the people backing it think about the game, they're still paying you money. They are still giving you money on the promise that something's coming back. So with that, PR. Okay. Give me a moment. Just digest that. Ask any questions while I have a drink and catch my breath. Because this is... Yep. My lord. This is... We're out of the rough zone of the economic theory. Almost. So, you have an idea. The PR is what sells your game ultimately. What do you say to the public? It's fine. Your internet can be as stable as the 3DS for all I care. Let's say you say something wrong at any stage from when it comes to being transparent, too much information can be bad. How do you balance? Some people won't like how you spend your money. That's something one of the case studies is going to touch on. Actually, one of the case studies, the second one, actually references how money is spent. So that will come up later. Keep that in the back of your mind and the back of my mind, because that is actually going to be talked about. Because if you don't, let's see, how do I do this without spoiling the case study? I'll get to it then. So, PR. What is marketing at the end of the day? Economics is a social study. It is the reasoning behind why things occur, why money exchanges hands, and why people do the things they do with the money they have. Why do people do the jobs they do? Why do people spend what they spend? Why do they spend it on this particular thing? This becomes the basis of marketing, because economics is in everything. Every social boundary, every academic boundary, everywhere. You just don't know about it. And marketing is, in reality, social influence. So, this influence is what gets you to buy things. Subconsciously, consciously, whatever. And this is often tuned to certain groups. So if one ad doesn't interest you, chances are it wasn't intended to interest you. Unless it's a really bad ad and it was aimed at you and it just sucks. That can happen. But marketing is, in a way, it's a bit of a social experiment. You influence people through your marketing. And they in turn can influence their friends. That can happen. But if economics is a study of why people spend money in the way they do, marketing is how you get them to do that. But. Yeah, it is important to say that about marketing. We're going to get that. Marketing is... Okay. Marketing specifically is a later session. This is more particularly about the PR side of marketing. So PR feeds into marketing, but you have to know the basis of marketing to know why PR affects it. That's all that was. The marketing lecture is the 7th one, I think. Yeah, about that. 6th or 7th. Because 3 is DLC, 4 is microtransactions, 5 is expectations. So yeah, 6 is marketing. This is the basis of what is marketing, and therefore why do you want good PR? Because your PR affects your marketing, not the other way around. So, when you say something wrong, you will face something called consumer resistance. The unwillingness of consumers to adopt a particular product, service, or change. If you interact with your market in an unfriendly way, they will walk away. Your PR, your public relations, have to be managed properly. You can get them back. It's not impossible, but it's very difficult. And a single misstep can kind of snowball. And one of the case studies has one of those simple missteps just kind of snowball down the hill into a big spaghetti monster of PR disasters. If you say the wrong thing, give the wrong impression, or even as basic as forgetting to log into your personal Twitter account when you're having a rant, you can kill your marketing campaign dead. That is one of the big problems with this. So as you said, Douglas, marketing is more about the concept, the broad concept. But you have to understand why you market before you can go into what happens if you PR wrong. There's the thing. So, case studies. Okay. This is going to go over... One's going to be purely PR. 2 of them are going to be about PR and funding. And the last one is also going to be purely PR. So it's going to kind of do a mix of the 2. Yeah. So the first one. Mr. Shifty. Rule number 1. Do not insult the people you want to buy your game. So Mr. Shifty came out, Switch and Steam, coming to other consoles later, and it had performance problems because Unity was still in beta at that point, I think. And someone brought it up as a concern to the team, and the team says, we're doing what we can, it's still early on the platform. And then they say, remember that even Zelda stutters. And they reply with, Zelda is a massive open world game. This is not. And they reply with, we're a small team. Compromise the experience by cutting stuff out or drop frames. We chose the latter, hoping Unity improves. Fair enough answer, you know. We had to make a choice. Do we cut parts of the game, or do we lose the frames because Unity isn't ready yet? Oh, my phone is going nuts. That is, you know, a valid statement. That is good PR, you know, being honest. And then they reply with, there's always the Switch version, the Steam version. Which is a case of, if you don't like it, you can get it elsewhere, and that is true, but some people don't have that option. This was rectified very quickly, the publisher stepped in, and I think the patch has been issued, but it was a bit of a nightmare, because the team turned around and said, well, if you don't like it, get the game elsewhere. Not realizing that some people do not have that option. That is one of... You can say a lot, and because this example's in Twitter, I can say this now. You can say a lot in 140 characters. You can make or break something. They didn't break it, but they pushed. And the response was interesting. It wasn't outright like people walking away from the campaign or the game. It was just kind of, well, that sucks, you know. But that was that. That was a basic, that was a minor goof that was thankfully caught very quickly. It was caught within 2 hours, I think, something like that. But the next one, and this one goes back to a previous question about how do you spend your money. Here's how you spend your money. So this is a game on Kickstarter right now, actually, called Project Rap Rabbit, being made by people who made stuff like Guitar Man, Parappa the Rapper, Vib Ribbon, those kind of games. You know, the rhythm games. And on the right, you will see the stretch goals, initially. So they wanted $1.1 million. Yes, you knew this was coming up. They wanted $1.1 million for 6 levels in a rhythm game. Then they wanted another $700,000 on top of that for a backer-only level and a backer-only costume. $700,000. And then they wanted another $500,000 for localizations. Then they wanted another $800,000 on top of that for an Xbox One version. Bear in mind, this was originally going to be just on PS4 and Steam. And then $400,000 for another level. Then $400,000 for a versus mode. Then $500,000 for another difficulty level. And then they wanted another $550,000 for a Switch version. And people looked at this and they thought, where is this money going? Bear in mind, it's localization into 4 languages, Afro. It doesn't cost $500,000. Let's put it this way. People immediately caught eye of this, and they caught eye of it because... actually, because of the Switch version. And they revised it. They took it down, and they revised it. So there's currently only one stretch goal, which is $400,000 for a Nintendo Switch edition. And they have actually come out and said, we'll ask the community to tell us what stretch goals are important, and they will be ordered accordingly. Because the 2 problems people had with this was, 1, honestly, the consoles should come a lot earlier and for a lot less money, and the extra stuff probably doesn't cost that much, really. But they did rectify it, and it's interesting to see if they will keep the comparatively lower gaps. But we'll just have to see, because this is one that's still ongoing. I don't even know if it's funded to the base goal yet. But this was a case of some people won't like how you're spending your money, because there's a point where you have to ask for more than you'll need, and then there's going to town kind of thing. So that might answer the question, because this was something that caught my eye as egregious. Like 1.1 million for 6 levels, 1.8 million for another level. No, doesn't take $700,000 to make a level. But that was that one. Next, Mighty number 9 again. Yay! Like an anime fan on prom night. Please tell me someone knows that. It was all over the internet. So this was interesting. Crowdfunded. Went well. Made lots of money. And there was so many problems. First, there was radio silence. Massive periods of time with no updates. Then there was the delays, for reasons that didn't make any sense. There was the complete directional change of the game. And then the actual PR part of the nightmare begins. So they hired a community manager, who was a relative of one of the developers, and she just attacked people on Twitter. And when you are paid to represent a product, that is probably not the best thing to do. But that's what happened. And that was its own entire beast. You know, the community manager just going off on people. I don't remember what for. Probably wasn't that positive. But that was a thing. And you'd think, oh, it'll stop there. No, it doesn't. There was more delays. And then there was the news that some features of the game weren't working. And they weren't explaining this to people. Then there was the second wave of donations via PayPal quite a while after. So apparently they needed more money. Then there was another crowdfunding campaign by the same people, by the same team, for a completely separate game. while this game was missing in action. So everybody immediately jumped on that as a way of saying, we crowdfunded this, you've been silent, and you want to crowdfund another game? And it fell through. But that didn't help the case. And then come release, or close to release when it eventually happened, 2 events happened. First was publisher Deep Silver making adverts for the game that were tasteless, such as saying it'll make you cry like an anime fan on prom night. So they went as far as to insult people. And even the developers called them out on that, saying that is some terrible marketing because you just insulted people. And then this scene you see here on the right from a live stream post-launch with the game's creator, Keiji Inafune, and his translator at the time. So Keiji said that he takes all responsibility for everything that went wrong, all the problems. You know, he leads the project, and he will take responsibility for that. That is what the direct translation is. During the live stream, though, the translator decided, I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say, well, it's better than nothing. So, in this live stream, where the developer meant to say, and did say, I'm taking responsibility, the PR person next to him, the translator, messed it up entirely by saying, it's better than nothing, right? And that became an entire debacle for about a week. And so this entire project, from early PR at the end of it, the marketing campaign, other events with the funding going on in the middle, everything kind of collapsed in on itself. I'm surprised the game came out. But that's kind of like the epitome of all your marketing being off, all the PR being a disaster, your funding being a disaster. Speaking of funding, though, last case study. Don't treat people like they're idiots. So this is one that came up over the weekend with Destiny 2. And one of the developers... Now, I don't think anybody expected a Nintendo Switch port of Destiny 2, but they asked anyway, just to kind of seal the coffin shut. And given they had said previously that it has to be 30 frames per second on PS4 because of the CPU, I don't think anybody was going to say, where's my version on a tablet? But the response they gave wasn't the probably actual answer of it won't run. They said, I think it's pretty unrealistic given we're an online-only game, because it's a portable, and then went on to say how much they love it and saying how it's probably not going to work because it's portable. So this argument was probably a mistake because said system has online-only games. It's got Steep coming, it's already got Dragon Quest X, which is in an MMO. It's got online-focused games, it's got games with online modes. Just because it's an online-only game, and that's the reason, was assuming people were idiots, and people didn't take too kindly to that because that was a dumb thing to say. But Destiny 2's entire weekend was plagued by the fact that the developers were the ones doing the interviews, not PR people. So they kind of just said whatever came to their heads. So, another example here. So, back when Destiny 1 launched, Activision said it made about $500 million in a day. And, okay, awesome. $500 million in a day. So, when asked if there would be dedicated servers, the game director says that's just not an investment we could make. So where'd the $500 million go? You know, where did all the DLC money go? Where did all the licensing fees go? Where did all this go? And they weren't able to answer. And this is something that I'm going to assume Activision, being the publisher, will want to kind of rein in. Because this was a case of the developer being honest, with the exception of the top quote, which is just assuming people are dumb. But as this next image shows, the biggest new video game franchise launch in history, but they couldn't afford dedicated servers. You know, the question is, where is the money going? What was your money spent on. Because if they had a PR person say it, they would have spun it. But the developer just kind of train wrecked this, especially for the PC crowd. This is why this gained traction. Because using a peer-to-peer on PC, that doesn't go down very well, from what I've heard and seen. But this answer was not good for the reputation of the game, even before it's out, because it's basically saying, we had the money, we just didn't. And that's a mistake. You know, it's all about the transparency. So for you small developers out there, like myself and like many of those watching, don't think, you know, take advice from Hello Games and No Man's Sky. I said I wouldn't bring that up, but here I am. Don't send someone out who will say what comes into their head. Don't send out a developer, because they aren't accustomed to making it sell. They're accustomed to making the game, not the selling of it. And that's the big takeaway from especially the Destiny 2 example. But now we come to the questions. Questions. Wonder how this will go. And yeah, the Project Rapid people didn't work for Apple. I don't know who they worked for initially. For $1.1 million? Nope. Not for that eventual product, anyway. No, so basically, in retrospect, where are all the foxes at? In the woods. In the warrens. Basically, today we've gone over, if you aren't sure what is your most potential target, what should you do to find it? Ask people. I was helping someone. If you aren't sure about your potential target audience, do research. Go to fan sites. So if you're making an RPG like Secret of Mana, go to people who played Secret of Mana. See if they'd be interested. You have to think about how you're going to sell your game, what your game is. This is going back to last week, but what is your game? Think about... Just ask people. You know, put a survey on Twitter. You know, that can very easily get you answers. What do I think about promoting a game at ACCC? What the hell's ACCC? You know, let's find out. Australian Computer and Consumer Convention. You can promote your game any way you think it's appropriate. Any advice on funding games through crowdfunding? Yes. Alamo City Comic Con. Okay. Yeah, present it there. You can present it there. Yeah, does it fit the people who are there? Probably. It's an anime game, an anime convention. Yeah, do it there. You'd get some good feedback from people who watch a lot of anime, I assume. Funding games through crowdfunding. Fun fact. I do have advice for funding games through crowdfunding. Don't do this. See this list? Don't do that. That's new. Bad. Don't do that. If you're going to make multiple versions on multiple hardware, put that at the front. Because that will make it more likely that people would see your project and go, ooh, that could come to something I own. And they'd fund it because they'd want it to hit that goal to come to something they own. Also, don't do backer exclusive stuff as stretch goals. Do that as backer rewards. Stretch goals should be for everybody. And the other thing, see here it says multiplayer versus mode. Mighty Number 9 did this too, and it was terrible. Don't put anything in the stretch goals that could be something you can't make. So, for instance, online play. Don't put that in the stretch goals. Because if it's in the stretch goals, you're not entirely prepared to make it. Keep everything there, something you are prepared to make. Within reason. Oh, and regular updates. Don't go silent. There's nothing worse than people seeing nothing worse than seeing your money go somewhere and it's gonna be stuck swimming around in the ether, you know, with no idea what's happening to it. Do I have an opinion on focus groups? I do. What kind of opinion do you want? Is it probable to believe at least half of 1%, so 0.5% of the total people attending, probably over 90,000 people will be interested in an anime game? Is it a specifically anime comic convention, or is it a general Comic-Con? Jumping back to the focus group question, I'm gonna be honest, they'll have video games there too. I'd say you're underestimating. Because if we say, you want my honest opinion of focus groups. Okay, so if we say 0.5% of 90,000, that's 450 people. Ooh, actually, you know what? That's actually not a bad guess. I would say you're underestimating a little. Just because 90,000 people is a lot of different possible people. I'd say your game will have to stand out at that point. It'll have to stand out amongst the other games. That's the big thing you got to do. Yeah, my opinion of focus groups. They can be helpful. Focus groups can indeed be helpful. But you have to remember that statistics can say anything, and a focus group is in no way representative of the population. So from my purely data analytical standpoint, I hate them because they're not representative of the population, but there is a chance. It has bouncy feet. Okay. It has bouncy features. You know what? If it's got bouncy features, more than 450 people. How much would you say you need to be able to demo for crowdfunding to be successful? How much of your game? For a business presentation, like to a publisher, not a lot. For crowdfunding, you have to be able to know who your game's for. So the big thing about crowdfunding is sharing it. And sharing it to the right people. Doing that and it'll pick up steam very quickly. But strictly within how much you have to show depends on the game. 20%? Heck, what did Ukulele have? Concept art, some character models, and some music? You'll need more than just like a small tech demo. Maybe like have an early level. I'd say yeah, early level. Have what is called a tech demo. A technical demonstration. Enough to convey the mechanics and why your game is unique. Now, depending on your game, that'll be a different amount. For an RPG, that could be quite a lot. But yeah, generally speaking, A level all the appropriate background reading in the description down below. Yeah. Going back to what Draco said, yeah. An anime game with jubbly bits at a anime convention? That'll get attention. You won't think it, but it will. Release the alpha to the entire public. How would you do that? How would you release an entire game to the public? Gonna have a demo kiosk? I mean, you could. That's one way to do it. It's not another RPG. Okay, you've got to do less work then. Oh, so you'd open it up for download, kind of. That depends on you. Do you feel it's good enough to be presented to that many people simultaneously? If so, then open alpha on Game Jolt is and submit game Steam Greenlight. That's a solid way to do it. The only problem is you have to be confident enough that it's going to be enough for them to play. That's what I'd say. You have to be confident enough that they'll play it in its current state. You can do it, but it's entirely down to you. I can't say whether or not it is. Stable and fun are two separate things. Stable and presentable are two different things. No, a brick wall is stable. It's not exactly presentable. Got to paint it first. Yeah. Updates every week. Yeah. I'd say... Again, I don't know. It's down to you. Do you think it's enough? If the answer to that question is yes, then do it. That's actually the best advice I can give when it comes to releasing a game in alpha. Do you see it as enough? As enough of a Pong, bouncy, powers, breakers, combos? Releasing it to the public. I actually can't say. Because it can go one of two ways, but I can't predict which way it would go. Because I'm not the one making the game, so I don't know how well it's come along, how well it's going along, all the information about it, to say if it's enough to entice people at the current point. That's why I say, if you feel it's enough, then do it. That's just my opinion. Yeah. My word is not gospel. It's just useful. Bop. Okie dokie. Yeah, skim through. There are questions. I have many questions, but yeah, I guess again it's the case of do you feel it's enough to release? That's not something I can say because it's your project. But there you go. Do you think it's enough? Because again, I can't say really. It looks like a complete enough game. So I would say if you think all the content you have is enough to make them want to play it, then release it. If you think it needs a little more content, like extra characters, modes, stages, whatever like that, then yes. But in terms of like from the front end being presentable, yes, kind of. Minus the bouncing. But yeah, again, it depends. Do you think there's enough there? That is the question. It's not a pre-alpha because it's actually a game in development. There's actually something there to play, so it is an alpha. Of course the alpha is free, you're not going to pay for it. Cosmetic shops, comes with one girl only, other girls need to be unlocked through in-game currency, earned in the game or purchased. That's not what I'm asking. Do you think what's in the game is enough? If the answer to that question is yes, then release it. What publishers do you think might be more indie friendly? Mid-tier? AAA? No. Too much financial risk. That's actually a very easy question. If you look up any like mid-tier publisher, then you'll see that they are very indie friendly. The guys who were once indies themselves. That kind of thing. But the bigger companies, much harder. Much more money focused. Oh, right. I need sleep because I have a deadline tomorrow. But yeah, that's a lot of interesting questions. Very interesting questions. I'd say release it then, if they think it's enough. Do you think No Man's Sky would have done worse if they had been truthful from the start and showed the game demo beforehand? Does hype beat honesty? Hype beats honesty to a point, but honesty means everything when it comes to the point of sale. Hype is pre-release. Honesty is release. That's another inspirational quote. I'm full of these, aren't I? Hype is a way to get interest. Honesty is a way to sell it. Yeah, ask your QA team. Okay. I'm off because I've got work to do. I have so much to do. Okay, sneak peek for the next session. DLC. So look forward to that. Lots of downloadable content and monetization. But as always, thanks for watching. Go thank Liam, he organises this. And I'm gonna get a drink.